Justin Harris is one of the smartest minds in the bodybuilding industry, a professional coach, former bodybuilder, powerlifter, and a founder of Troponin Nutrition. In this episode, he breaks down how bodybuilding competition prep should really look, cutting through the myths and sharing his approach to picking athletes.
IDF1 came out in that time and it didn't advance the sport. GH did. If you need to lose more than 50 pounds for a single contest, you are over fat. It's basically a miracle for appetite suppressant. I think there's going to be a lot of side effects that develop over time that we don't quite know yet. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
Yeah.
Man, I told you I'm out of practice.
So Justin is a little rusty, but other than that, is everything I believe is going to be fine. Because today we are going to talk a little bit about the most probably interesting part for those who are competitors themselves, because we are going to talk about competition prep and actually the peak week and what to do after. But before we're going to get into that topic, I would want to just briefly remember everyone's where we have finished with the first part. If anyone just haven't seen the first part, just please check it out. It's on my YouTube already. So we just finished on the off season. So the scenario was that I am a guy who just wanted to switch it up from the middle heavy to super heavyweight. So I finished off my competition prep and just started to be a new client of yours. And we do like the whole off season together. Let's say from 220, we finished up with probably 260 to 70 on a very, very good lean composition. So what's now? Would you like to do some time off, a deload to regards to training before the prep, or do you think it's the best to go straight into the prep?
It depends. And we do these and you you do your podcast, you give a scenario and you kind of give an exact scenario, and then people think that's what you always do, and they don't realize it's if you know what you're doing, it's a little bit different for everyone. I mean, everyone. And one of the other confusing things is the rebound that I'm so big on. And then one of the first comments people will say is, well, why don't I ever see the pros doing a rebound? And that's the thing, is you're not going to get a 40 or 50 pound size gain when you're 305 pounds. The rebound, and most people never have to worry about this, but you get about two really good rebounds, kind of your first two shows or second and third show if you kind of botch the first one. If you have good genetics, maybe a third one. But that's really all you need, because if you do things properly, you should be a super heavyweight by your third show, unless you're, very short, but then you should be a full heavyweight. And after that, the things change, because you're not trying to blow up in size, because you're closer to your max and it starts getting unhealthy. And I always forget to say that. And so people think, that this is just automatic. But someone like Brandon Curry, we don't do a rebound with him. He's 44 years old. He's not going to add 40 pounds of muscle. Or John Rivas is, he's around in the 260s on stage, maybe 270 if we nail it this year. There's no benefit to him getting to 320 of pure bloat. But the reason John will be 265, 270 on stage is because we did two solid rebounds and moved him from a heavyweight to, he went whatever, like 227 or something to 245 to, high 250s when he turned pro. And then here we are now. So he's past that. And so, but most people never have to worry about that, because most people aren't walking around at 300 pounds with abs. So you still have room to rebound. But, so same thing at the end of the off season. One of the main reasons I focus on injectable only PEDs in the off season, no orals, no harsh injectables, no tren, basically just an anabolic that you prefer. I like Primobolan, EQ, MPP would work. Masteron, maybe. I'm not a huge fan of that in the off season. And then test. And the reason is because if you really have to kind of think what the goal is. For the most part, all gear works similarly. And we know, and you can disagree, and people will disagree, but every one of us has taken Masteron thinking it was Primobolan. Every one of us has taken Winstrol and think, and maybe we catch on eventually, but it's not immediately obvious. The actions are fairly similar across compounds. So what you're trying to do basically is if you have a 20-year career and you're going to compete frequently, and which is very harsh compounds, how can I get the maximum total milligrams of anabolics in my body over a 365-day period with the minimal health risk? Because if there is health effects, then that's going to sidetrack you. And so that's why I do what I do in the off season. It allows us to put the most milligrams of gear in you with with very little risk of side effect. And also that allows us to go into contest prep with livers fine, where our blood sugar A1C is not screwed up, our lipids aren't completely destroyed because we haven't used anything like any DHT derivatives, anything harsh. Our estrogen hasn't been bottomed out. And so because of that, we have a little bit of leeway where we don't necessarily need a full clean out phase. Now, ideally, I recommend 2 lean out phases every year. If I could just, I'll organize the year. I think we might have done this last time, but it works really well once you get to the level where you're trying to turn professional in bodybuilding. There's usually like a contest season. In the United States, there's a bunch of pro qualifiers in the summer, which kind of extends to late summer. And then you have like nationals at the end of the year, November, which kind of leaks into the Arnold, but that's almost separate. So you have like a chunk of time where you compete. And so if you plan it out, you do a 16-week contest prep, and then a 4 to 6 week rebound, and then a 4 to 8 week cruise clean out, a 16 to 20 week off season, and then maybe another 4-week cruise. That's about 52 weeks. And it works out perfect. You get one big, long 4 to 5 month off season blast with mild injectable compounds, and I consider test mild generally, and then one big contest prep cycle. And then you have about 8 to 12 weeks of free time there where you can drop in to a couple TRT cruises. And I would prefer that for most people, but it's hard to get people to go off, period. And so if I'm going to force one, it's going to be after the rebound, because by that time we've done the harsh contest prep and the huge weight gain in the rebound. That's the time to clean out. So I'm not a stickler for pre-contest clean out phases, but only because of the way we do things. If someone comes to me and they've been using orals, DHB, Tren, Anadrol, then yeah, we're going to clean out, or our body's just not going to respond to things by the time we get to show date.
Yeah, I'm glad that you clarified that, because for me it's obvious, because I know how we do everything. So for me it's obvious that you will never do something like that if someone is just going bizarre with the compounds and food even,
Yeah.
because we both know that the food sometimes might be even worse than the
Yeah.
PEDs,
Oh yeah, for
especially
sure.
for
Yeah.
those guys who wanted to push the weight, because there are some still competitors that think that you have to push as maximum weight as is possible just to be a super heavyweight, which is
Mhm.
actually not true. So let's say that then we finished. We just go into the competition prep. Just how much, knowing that I am in a good shape, like relatively for your standards, obviously.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how much time do you like to have with your clients for those periods? So, for example, some coaches do like 8, 12, 16, 20 weeks. I've heard of 25 weeks and more for
Yeah.
the whole prep.
Yeah, I know 20 weeks, Matt Porter was big on that. And that was kind of a thing for a while. It's kind of gone through phases. I've been around the sport long enough I remember in the 80s, when I first started buying magazines, it was much shorter. A lot of guys would talk about an 8 or 10 week prep. And then for a long time through the 90s, all the way up to the mid 2000s, it was just standard 12-week contest prep. That's just kind of what everyone did. Chad Nichols, Milos, Chris Aceto, everyone did the 12-week prep. And then it started leaking into a little bit longer, 16 weeks. And I generally like 16 weeks. It's partly because if a client is worried about they need longer or anything like that, or they won't be in shape, I'll say, we're targeting 2 to 3 pounds of fat loss per week. Even at 2 pounds of fat loss per week, that's 32 pounds of fat, plus probably 20 pounds of water that comes with it, because fat is really hydrated tissue, or not even really tissue, really hydrated, I guess you'd call it tissue, but and so if you need to lose more than 50 pounds for a single contest, you are over fat. I mean, that's kind of that's my, if you need longer than 16 weeks, then you you weren't a bodybuilder in the off season. So so we weren't optimal in the off season. We didn't optimally grow because if you're that fat that you need 5 months to get in shape, you were clearly over the body fat level where aromatization to estrogen skyrockets. So all your gear is less effective. Your insulin sensitivity plummets. All the things that are like helpful to anabolism are out the door basically once your body fat gets too high. So you've screwed yourself twice. You didn't grow. Your weight went up, but you didn't add muscle like you wanted to. That's the why I hate weight because the way to make the scale go up is to basically not build muscle by adding body fat and put yourself not optimally hormonally. So right out the gate, if you need longer than 16 weeks, why do the show? Because you already fucked up the off season. You weren't optimal, and that's a harsh reality. Everyone's been there. I've been there myself. And I've been there and tried to do this show and realized that there wasn't enough time. And that's how I got to 16 weeks because that was a 12-week prep. But that's kind of it for I've never seen anyone look better after 20 weeks than they did at 16 on stage. That's a long time to diet. Everyone knows, you do a 16-week prep. By the time you get a month out, you're hurting, Imagine you got, 2 more months. You're barely past halfway. You're 2/3 of the way in the diet at that point when you're at the wall. And so I guess I say rather than just give a set week length, what I like to do is 16 weeks, kind of ease into the diet and basically diet adjustments only, not much cardio changes, zero changes to gear until 12 weeks out. And your metabolism should be high. You should be able to make 2 pounds of fat a week. Should be 8 pounds of fat, probably 12 pounds lighter at the 12-week mark. Then we're already in decent shape. Now we'll start adding in fat burners, get some stimulant, some caffeine, some ephedrine, give us a little energy boost, a little appetite suppression, which isn't important now with the GLPs and stuff. But so you get that, get a little, and then we bring in cardio, and you got the energy for cardio, so it's not so bad. And you go about 2 more weeks, and we'll start trickling clen. And then because clen has such a long half-life, we'll slowly increase the dose. So, basically like 20 micrograms every week. So that's kind of continually building up. So we have that nice slow ramp of an energetic stimulant. We got the caffeine. And then I don't really bring in the harsh compounds until like 8 weeks out. That's when we start bringing your estrogen down, bringing you dry. But by then, we're halfway through the diet. And if you know the way I do diets, basically from 12 to 16 weeks or 12 to 6 weeks is when I call it like grind mode. That's when we do everything. By 6 weeks out, the diet is maxed out generally for most people, almost everyone. We won't go harder than that. And we'll stay there until you're stage ready. But if we've done everything correctly, and we really probably only needed 12 weeks, but we gave 16 weeks, we're going to get to 3 or 4 weeks out. You're basically stage lean, which is the first phase of bodybuilding contest prep. Contest prep is 2 phases, and they're completely separate. So phase 1, get the fat off. Nothing matters other than that. Doesn't matter if you're full, doesn't matter if you're flat. We can fix any level of flatness in the final week. You can't fix any fatness. So phase 1 is get the fat off. And that's the only thing you worry about. You don't worry about fullness, size, anything, because size, you're not losing contractile tissue. You're just losing fullness. Once the fat is off, then we pretty up the physique. And so that's why I like to have the diet maxed out at 6 weeks out. Hopefully by 3 or 4 weeks out, we're pretty much there and we can start bringing calories up. We're not going to go to off season. You're still going to be in a deficit. So you're still going to burn fat, but we can reduce cardio, let your metabolism kind of come back to life, fill you out a little bit, which thins the skin. And that's the pretty up the physique look. Kind of the old school way was you grind until you carb up, and then your pretty up phase is like a 3-day period, which you're asking the body to do a lot perfectly and nail it every time if you're only giving it 3 days. So I like to ramp up slowly the final weeks.
Yeah, and to be honest, when you just started to explain it, first of all, this is going to be probably my shortest podcast ever, just because you've just maxed out all of my questions almost. But actually, the Brandon Carey will be the perfect example of what you just said, because I remember when he just first started working with you, everyone's just started to think that, oh my God, what is up? And I
Because he
remember
was
that.
small.
Yeah, and I remember that Brandon explained it on Instagram that this is just like a phase, and
Mm-hmm.
from now you are just starting to actually doing the correct way bodybuilding prep, and
Yeah.
that is if someone is interested in that, just some post back through the beginning of the
Mhm.
last year, I believe, and something like that. And that's gonna be just the perfect example of what we just explained. So the first question we gonna be around the training, because we probably both know that the training, what build the muscle, just keep the muscle. But
Mhm.
I just need to ask you about the training. If anything just started to change throughout the whole prep, maybe you adjust the volume, maybe you adjust the intensifiers, because we both know that there are two camps: those who are
Mhm.
cutting the volume down, and those who are bumping up the volumes just to burn more calories.
Mhm. And neither is wrong. I mean, you just have to think what you're doing. The biggest thing to get through people's head that's hard is they want to look good all the time. And there's phases to everything. In the off season, you're not going to look like you're on stage because you need to be fuller. You need to be watery. You have to accept that. But then you also have to understand what you're doing. We're not just trying to add scale weight. We're trying to add muscle. And muscle doesn't add scale weight very much because if you've ever seen someone that adds 10 pounds of legit, someone who's 232 on stage and the next year they're 242 in the same conditioning, they look like a different bodybuilder. 10 pounds of true stage weight is a leap forward. I mean, that's a weight class jump. That's a big difference. So guys thinking they're going to gain 20 pounds in 8 weeks, you're not. You're not going to gain muscle. It's just not. And you shouldn't even try to, because this is how many years have people been lifting? I've been doing it 30 years, 30 more than that. I've been doing it God, since like 87, I think. So 40 years. Jesus Christ. But so 40 years, there you go. So if I gain 10 pounds of muscle a year, that's 400 pounds of muscle. So even that's not sustainable. That's impossible to sustain long term. So none of us want to think that, but this sport is really weird in that basically what you're doing is you're just literally you're banging your head against the wall and know that those dents will eventually leave a hole that you can climb through. But you don't, if you try to make the hole, you're just going to knock yourself out. You got to be careful with it. And so I'm kind of getting sidetracked with this, but and then so in contest prep, you have to understand the phase. How you look at 6 weeks out means nothing. How much body fat you have at 6 weeks out means something, because you need to be low enough in body fat so that you can get basically zero fat or as close as possible by the final week. And the weird thing is, all the people who don't want to do that worry about how big they're going to be, and they don't want to see their weight drop. But the problem is, if you want to be small on stage, be big in prep. If you want to be big on stage, be small in prep. And Brandon Curry is a good example of that, because if you take the same person, and I'll use some of my weights, the last contest I did, I think I was 266 at some point in the final week. I don't remember what I weighed in at. I think 260 something, but 266. So if you take I could have been like 270, 272. I looked in the gym. My ass might be a little soggy, but with shorts and a tank top, everyone's telling you shred. I've never seen anyone look like that. And so if I push that, and I could push that 272, 275 with fullness, and in the gym, I look like a monster. But that doesn't work on stage, and it doesn't matter, because what's going to happen is I'm going to get to the final week, I'm going to be 275, and then I'm going to be faced with the hard reality of I'm not stage ready. I'm too fat. And so what does everyone do then? I'll dry out really hard. I'll take diuretics, which doesn't work because your diuretics don't get rid of fat, but everyone tries it, and then they lose 15 pounds. And then rather than be on stage at 270 or 265, they're on stage at 245, soft because they're fat and soft because they're dehydrated. And it's the worst look. If you take the opposite approach and say that exact same person, say I get to 260 or whatever, and I'm like, I'm going to try to make heavyweight. I never could. There's just not wet. But if I grind and grind and grind, I get to 245, and you can see, striations through my lips. You can see my teeth through my upper lip. I'm so shredded. My entire body feels like the skin over my knuckles. Then I get down to maybe 245. I start carving up. I'm 265 on stage, shredded. So being big and prep leaves me at like 255 on stage, soft, flat, tried to over diuretic, and getting too small in prep, letting me eat like a king in the final week, and I end up heavier. And it's like, anyway, if you've ever taken like a anatomy and physiology course, it's like, it's first semester stuff, but I don't know why it's hard. I mean, most people don't have a degree in anatomy and physiology, so it's hard to to process that, because the only real numerical metric we have for progress is the scale. And the scale on any given day is essentially useless, because to lose 2 pounds of fat, you have to be in 1,000-calorie deficit 7 days in a row, a deep diet deficit for a full week. To gain 2 pounds of weight, I just need to drink this and not pee, you know? And so it's like I could, and this happens all the time. I had a client today, discouraged. Some of the best chicken pics I've ever seen of him. You know, he's in contest prep, 12 weeks out, leaner he's ever been, far bigger than he's ever been, but his weight didn't drop this week. And so his check-in's all discouraged, doesn't know what's wrong. And it's like, are you looking at the pictures? You know, the judges you don't step on the scale on stage, you show your physique on stage. And so, yeah, I just wish the scale would go away, you know, because you have a mirror, and that's what the judges use. You have the tool the judges use at your home. You have every window you pass. You have the tool the judges use to judge your physique everywhere. Why ignore that and go stand on something that all the scale does is takes a spring and the K constant. If you've ever read a physics course, the K potential is negative Kx. And so you just put weight on it and see how much the spring compresses, and then you get a linear pattern. That's the K value. And then they just put that in there, and by how much the spring compresses, it tells you your weight. Nothing to do with body composition. It's every high school physics student has done that lab and invented a scale of equal quality. No one would trust their 11th grade science project as a measure of their body composition and whether they're a good bodybuilder or not. But we all step on a scale and let it, control our mind.
Yeah, but the competitors like to use the scale just because it's far easier to put the numbers to the spreadsheet than the photos. So
you know what's even easier is just make a number up. It's just as accurate. Just say it. It doesn't mean it's not telling. I mean, you can change it by 15 pounds easily. One of my ebooks shows how you can lose 30 pounds in 3 days and gain 30 pounds in 24 hours if you have to make weight for a powerlifting meet. You know, there's no body composition changes, no muscle mass changes, no body fat changes. And that's a 60-pound swing up and down over a 4-day span.
Yeah, I know that it's gonna be probably very difficult for you just because in your head it's lining up so perfectly. But could you be so kind to try to explain like a perfect scenario for someone like me, for example, let's just say 270. We wanted to be, I don't know, like maybe 230 or something. Let's say that we put on 20 pounds. Doesn't matter. The weight is doesn't matter. But what would you do with let's say we started with 4,500 calories, like 300 protein, like I don't remember, like I don't even can to count it out how much carbs that could be, but that says like 700 carbs or something, and the rest is fats. How would you structure my diet from the get-go? Because I am curious about, would you like to cut it harshly at the beginning and then just slowly titrate it up?
Slowly titrate it. And the reason is you can fight nature and you can fight physiology as much as you want, but it's always going to win. Conservation of energy and conservation laws are like a very important thing. Noether's theorem, Emmy Noether, is a famous mathematical theorem. My daughter's named Emmy, and if you've been following my Substack, I'm actually about to produce a paper that uses Noether's theorem. We proved Noether's theorem in neural networks. Where I'm working on a research where I don't want to get on a sidetrack here, but typical AI use vector and scalar components. So they lay basically everything on the vector, and the vector carries through. And so the vector, like, just to keep simple, like we say, this image of this podcast, there's a bunch of zeros and ones put through assembly language, and it's some code that this movie podcast that gets slapped on a vector, and that's carried through the whole system. And you add these scalar components like gain amplification when these certain vectors are closer to what the answer needs to be, or the AI thinks these are good pathways. It'll amplify those. It'll blunt these. It'll back propagate. And which, oh God, why did I even get on the sidetrack? But anyway, so I thought, well, that's stupid. The brain works the opposite. The brain's a bunch of these neurons, just sends an electrical signal. All the action happens at the synapse. That's where the neurotransmitters are released. So I thought, well, why don't we reverse that? Rather than put these really compute and energy heavy vectors and just run them through the system the whole time, just throw a bunch of unit bit vectors, just single on-off actions, and at the end, scalar components. So the cost of an action is almost nothing. A bit is nothing. So we can send 300 million bits out and vectors out at almost no cost. And that's about the rate the brain does versus one per important vector. And then we dictate the scalar components, and those live in nth dimensional space. So those could have essentially, the goal is to prove that we can build an LLM, a large language model with neural networks without language, because the information's so free, the action's so cheap, that we at the scalar component, we could potentially just send out like chunks of zeros and ones, or assembly language, or a really rudimentary, because those can go out in infinite quantity, and the action's basically free. And so it'll get, as it goes through, it'll get picked up in the scalar components that have value, will kind of self-energize, and it is emergent. It's emergent, and that's what we found in our research. But even more importantly, we proved Noether's theorem using neural networks, which is a publishable finding. And so we'll be publishing. We have the paper, we got a format and everything. I have the paper for archive. And so hopefully within the next month, we'll publish that for archive. We took the same approach, Hamiltonian dynamics, and applied it in phase space for financial markets. And where we let momentum be like market volatility or market action, momentum, basically, literally. And that's a conserved quantity. And when we worked around that conservation, we found that this approach beat every other traditional portfolio management system, like 1/n equal weighting, 60/40, which in practice, it doesn't, this method. It's a known method, Merton, but we actually applied it to true stock market data from 2007 to 2024. And we averaged 12% returns across two different approaches by how tight we restricted the conservation, and beat every other method. So conservation laws, long story short, are very, very important. You can't beat them. To burn fat, you have to get 3,500 calories. You have to eat 3,500 calories less than you burn, and then hope all of those calories come from body fat. And they won't. They'll come from glycogen too. So you're very limited there. So you want to walk that line. You want to toe that 2 pounds of fat per week line. You can bottom out calories and get 3 pounds that first week, but then your metabolism shot, your energy shot. And so I guess an analogy I use a lot is, you don't want to be a kamikaze pilot. And that's what people think. They think prep is just and then slam into the show. That's great. You'll make it to the show, but it's not, you're not surviving it. What you want to do is you want to land the jet on the aircraft carrier. You go through prep, and you're fighting the war, and you're throwing bombs, you're dodging missiles. When you get to the aircraft carrier, you want a nice landing, and that's what you want in the peak week. And so you want to go into that final week still having the energy and like the livelihood to actually peak properly. And if you bury yourself at the beginning of prep, you won't. And the problem is, you want to bury yourself in prep. Why? Because you're not hungry. You're sick of eating. It's off season. You're sick of being fat. And so your brain thinks, let me get a jump on this. And you will get a jump on it, but that jump's going to stall out, and you're going to get to the grind point of prep when everything's hard and you'll have nothing left. Calories are bottomed out, cardio's maxed out, and you can't burn fat. I like to, if we keep that 2 pounds, I like to ride that wave the whole prep.
Yeah, I'm glad that you clarified that, because I am not gonna lie. For the three-fourths of your sentence, I haven't clue what
Sorry,
you just talked
it's so
about.
bad. I start getting on a tangent. I realize it's like terrible. I try to wrap it up, and then I just like shortcut half of it.
It is great, but not for people like me with those just small mind
It's not.
people.
It's not. It's just that I come from a physics background, and it's just a different way of thinking. And it's like when Daniel Armatino always talks about, because I don't feel, I've had therapeutic modalities, and I've had but when you start talking about sagittal plane, and I have to think like, okay, the human body's like this. This is where other people speak in that language. That I just
Yeah.
speak in the language of mathematics, because that's what my degree is in. So.
Yeah, so basically you're clarifying the process, so I'm not gonna deep dive with that, because it's at this point, at least for me, it's rather easy, like rather easy. But what you've told that around the 12 weeks mark, something like that, you
Mhm.
will just start into switching up some PDs, and just maybe just trying to do something about it. So
Mhm.
just tell me how would the PEDs change? Let's say we've
Mhm,
been on like test, EQ, and maybe natural because probably those trio is the most popular in bodybuilding.
mhm,
Most of the guys probably were built like that.
yeah,
And also I would like to ask you about the GH use
mhm,
throughout the whole process.
mhm. Well, for I like to, I think I look at things. I try to look at things differently. I try to look at the purpose or the goal. And so the why are we switching the gear? We're not switching gear for no reason. We're not just taking trend. We're taking trend because it dries you out. It's really potent. I mean, it sucks for sleep, but it increases metabolism. A lot of times it lowers appetite. It does all the things we want in prep. That's why, and so why don't we run it all year? Well, because those things aren't beneficial all the time. If you can't eat, if your blood work's terrible and you got night sweats and you're all agitated, it's not a perfect off season. So even though it's a great compound, if you do that year round, you're going to run into problems. But if you go into 8 or 10 weeks out and you haven't used tren all year, your blood work's good because you were smart about the way we did things in the off season, then we can latch onto that. Then we want the metabolism boost. We want the reduction of appetite. All those things are perfect then. So I don't fight the body. I don't pick gear. I say, what do we need? What do we need later in prep? We want androgens high. Why? Because that's why my men's skin looks rougher than women's. That's that gritty, grainy, leather skin look is androgens. We want that. We want sky high androgens. What don't we want? Well, the other thing women have, that soft feminine face, soft watery skin, that's estrogen. We want that removed. So as prep goes on lower, we want the hormonal shift to be more androgens, less estrogens. What happens when estrogens get really low? You feel like shit. You got no energy, you got anxiety, you're depressed. It's miserable. No sex drive. So you don't want that all year. Also, you want estrogen bottomed out as little as possible, but we do know it needs to be bottomed out. And one of the reasons is because it's difficult to get very low in body fat when estrogen's high. And that's one of the reasons for same calorie intake, women will have less muscle and more body fat because their hormones are such that they have low androgen and high estrogen, which promotes that. Where men at the same calorie intake will have higher muscle mass and lower body fat, and that's largely hormonal. So when does that really start to happen? When you start getting to around single digits, which happens at like the 8, 10, 12 week out mark, that's when we start bringing those things. There's no benefit to bottoming estrogen when you're 14% body fat. You can lose fat at 14% body fat with estrogen sky high. There's plenty of guys walking around with estrogen at 100 nanograms per deciliter as a picograms, whatever, 100 for estrogen in the off season, looking lean. They just got kind of thick skin, that full skin, which is actually good in the off season. It's a softer, less acne look. But in prep, when you get below about 12%, that fights you. So everything is just geared for that. What do we need? We need a low estrogen. We need high androgen. But if estrogen's low too long, you feel like shit. So we guide it, and that's why. And that's also with the fat burners. We want the energy when the diet starts getting hard. We want the appetite suppression when energy gets hard, but we don't want ephedrine and caffeine to stop working when you're 4 weeks out. That's when you need it the most. So that's why we titrate the clen up. That's why we start the ephedrine and caffeine at 12 weeks out. That's why we do all those things. So everything's just geared for that. I don't pick compounds. I pick what do we need hormonally at this stage, and then you fit the cycle to that.
Okay. So what about the GH?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm different. Here's my view on GH, and and anyone who disagrees, I would love to see their data because I have data, I have tracked it. As far as dosing protocols, when I see people say you got to take it in the morning, you got to take 2 IUs every 2 hours, you got to do this, you got to do that. From everything I've tracked over 20 some years of thousands of clients and tracking their progress and logging it against GH doses that I knew, and you have to trust the clients on this. The only thing I can say about GH is, one, if it's real, it works. And two, if you take more, it does more of the GH stuff. And that's it. 10 IUs works like 10 IUs, whether you take 10 IUs at once in the morning, 10 IUs at night, 2 IUs 5 times throughout the day. Theoretically, you could argue that, pulsing and having stable GH levels is arguably better, but you could also argue that spikes are better because you're going to get bigger IGF-1 releases. What I've said is when you can argue both sides of the coin, then I don't let the argument decide. I let the results decide. And I just my view on GH is yes, it works, obviously. And it works differently than people think. It really doesn't build muscle. But back to conservation laws, it uses that beautifully because it doesn't really change your metabolic rate, but it increases your rate of fat oxidation from the calories you do eat. So if you take me over a year and I eat 3,000 calories a day and I burn whatever 10 units of fat a day, and the next year I eat 3,000 calories a day, but I burn 12 units of fat every day, that's 2 free units that have to go somewhere else. They don't get to disappear. They still exist in conservation of energy. So they have to appear on my body as glycogen or muscle. GH doesn't promote glycogen synthesis very well. So over time, by necessity, if your metabolism doesn't slow, and it won't on GH, then that increased fat loss has to result in increased rates of muscle gain or glycogen synthesis, which is unlikely to keep conservation of energy. So that's the real benefit. And that's why GH is a long-term drug. I would never recommend anyone, if you're taking like trying to do 20 IUs of GH for 8 weeks before a contest because of the fat burning benefits, save your money, buy a bunch of tests, Tren and Masteron and some GLP, and you'll get way better fat burning. If you're going to take GH consistently for 10 years, you are going to be a dramatically better body composition at year 10 than if you didn't take the GH for 10 years. But over any 2-3 month period, you're not going to notice much difference other than that GH fullness, which is immediate.
Mm-hmm. Selfishly, I need to ask you because you've mentioned that you can either have like a stable concentration, so probably injected intramuscular, not intramuscular, but sub-Q, and then higher peaks, which is the intramuscular route.
Mm-hmm.
So because I cannot find any papers on that, and I'm really no, yeah, and I am really curious because I'm just in the middle of writing my article about a GA and like everything you need to know about it, and I found out that massive amount of studies about the route of administration.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing about what it really does to the IGF-1, because we both know that GH itself, it doesn't build muscle at all.
I don't think IGF-1 is the path either. And the reason why is if anyone's taken legit IGF-1 like Icrelex or something at high enough doses, you'll get gyno pretty quickly. And so when people are talking about spiking IGF-1 and they're not getting gyno, you're not spiking IGF-1. And that's not, I mean, Icrelex goes through the thing that Real Pharma GH or Ceros went through 15 years ago, where it's really rare, it's really expensive. You got to know a source, it's hard to find. So when you go through all that, when you finally get it, whether or not it works great, you convince yourself it does. And it usually does because you're like, fuck, I'm spending $5,000 on this. I am eating every meal perfect, every workout perfect. And that's where I just don't think IGF-1, we've had IGF-1 for 20 years. And physiques haven't improved. When did GH come out? Like late 80s, very early 90s. By 93, it was pretty consistent. Dorian Yates, 1993, leap forward in bodybuilding. When did insulin come out? I always call 96 the insulin Olympia. That's the first year everyone was full as fuck on stage. Leap forward, and Test and D-Ball came out in the 60s. Arnold Schwarzenegger, leap forward from Steve Reeves. You get higher doses, Winstrol, other compounds through the 70s and 80s, leap forward. So every time a new thing gets introduced, we get a huge progress in bodybuilding physiques. But, IGF came out, in really big quantities in like 2005 is when it was kind of IGF-LR3 was kind of the thing. Everyone says that's after the glory days of bodybuilding. And the glory years always shift. The glory years are always the generation before you. Because when Ronnie or Phil Heath were Mr. Olympia, everyone hated their look and said they looked like shit. And when Dorian was Mr. Olympia, everyone, when Ronnie was Mr. Olympia, everyone said Ronnie looked like shit. We miss Dorian. When Dorian was Mr. Olympia, everyone hated him. He looks like shit. We miss Lee Haney. That's just human nature.
Yeah.
But I think you can look at physiques and say 60s are different than 50s, 70s are different than 60s, 80s, 90s. You get to about 98, Ronnie's first Olympia, he'd still do good on shows, today. And so IGF-1 came out in that time and it didn't advance the sport. GH did very clearly. And so that's why I think the benefit is that conservation of energy approach, which is really independent of IGF-1. Whatever growth you get from IGF-1, great. but just take enough of it to reach the clinical studies that because you need to take a lot of 100 micrograms post workout 5 days a week is not what the clinical studies are. And if you
Yeah.
take what the studies show, you're going to get gyno.
Yeah, actually, to be honest, the Increlex is, well, even on paper, it's not make sense just because the short acting of the real Increlex
Yeah, yeah,
is actually a poor choice. To be honest,
yeah,
the IGFL3 looks far much better
yeah.
than
And that's
the
the
real
hard thing in this
Increlex.
sport, because this sport is run on dogma and
Yeah.
research is run on facts, and so if you come from a research background and you're used to looking at the papers, you'll see that time and time again in the sport. And basically what happens is a new very expensive compound is always touted as the holy grail. If anyone was around like 2001, you remember prostaglandins. That was the peak stupidity in bodybuilding, because people thought you take prostaglandins, and I don't remember what people were looking to trigger, like interleukin 15 or some, protease inhibitors was a thing for a minute. But you take, I never did prostaglandins because I knew what they are. People take them, and if you weren't on the toilet when you took them, you were in trouble because you were shitting your brains out instantly, because it caused like smooth muscle contraction. No one got any bigger, but because it was hard to find and super expensive, everyone wanted it. And then when everyone found out AIDS patients were taking GH, they thought, well, geez, logically, AIDS people are always huge and muscular. Let's do what they're doing. But because bodybuilders don't like to think like the logic, they just like to think drugs. We were looking at everything AIDS patients took. So there was a period of time like 2002-ish, something like that. It's kind of in that same phase where people were looking at protease inhibitors. If you read the papers on protease inhibitors, the side effects are a big distended gut and shrunken limbs, so skinny arms and legs and a big old gut, which I guess kind of we did go down that path a little bit, but yeah. So trust the research. Like with GH, the reason they're not trying to make people muscular, but they did need to make growth hormone deficient children big. And they don't care about dose. They don't care, like even an IU. An IU isn't a dosing measurement. It's unit of volume. The only reason we use the IU is basically 3 IUs per milligram, 3.3. So like what we call 10 IUs is really like a 3 milligram vial, and a 5 milligram vial is what we call 15 IUs. They're not though; they're milligrams. But even that, like, so IU meant nothing. Like when Sarista made 18 IUs, they just put 6 milligrams of GH and they gave you 18 IUs of water to reconstitute it with. They don't care if 18 IUs is a lot. There wasn't a lot. There's nothing to compare it to. They only cared what produced the results in the children. And so we take that and we go, well, yeah, these guys, yeah, there's 700 PhDs with $400 million backing them. But I read a paper that I didn't understand, and I'm going to apply and we all, like, if you go back, like if you listen to Kurt Havens, he's someone I like because he has a real research background, and you talk with him about GH, and yeah, it's basically what I've always said. I think he goes a little deeper into it because he understands it better, but it's, you do take quite a bit. People with GH deficiencies do take quite a bit. So if you're taking 2 IUs a day, you're not getting GH benefits. But if you're taking more than 10 IUs a day, you are going to get GH side effects eventually. So you just kind of, you just have to know all those things. So GH works. You take high dose long enough, you're going to get a GH look, widen waist. You're going to get some atrophy of the triceps and outer quad sweep, basically where there's easy nerve compression. The carpal tunnel, you feel carpal tunnel in that carpal tunnel in your wrist, but those nerves are compressed everywhere. And that's why I think you'll see a lot of bodybuilders they'll lose this muscle, the brachioradialis. You'll see a lot of tricep issues. You'll see a lot of quad sweep. A lot of guys late in their career have huge adductors and almost no outer quad sweep. And I think that's large. Same with calves. You see lumbar compression will compress the nerve that feeds the gastrocnemius. And so you see a lot of guys, especially in the GH area, lose their inner calf, the bigger gastrocnemius muscle of the two big in the back. And so you see all those effects everywhere. And so I guess going back to, I don't have a GH recommendation. I say, we know what GH does. We're trying to use that conservation of energy. We know if we take it long-term, we're going to, at the same body weight, we're going to have less body fat eventually. But we also know if we take too much, we have all that nerve compression stuff, and it builds up over time. So if you're 18 years old, taking 15 IUs of GH, great. You're going to look great now. But when you're 35 at your peak, when you should be making, when you should be winning $1 million prize monies in bodybuilding, you're going to have palumboism, and you're not going to do well. So I say basically hold off until you're 30. not hold off, but be mild until you're 30. Once you hit 30, go ape shit if you want, because by the time you get the effects, you're kind of at the end of your career anyways.
Actually, like going side roads, you know what I wanted to do, like very, very much from the last like couple of months, just make a one big like debate, how to say it, like round table, something like that,
Yeah.
with people that have a kind of contractive take on the GH, because we have seen it a lot, and even like the Kurt Heavens you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mind, like what he
Yeah.
thinks about the
Corner.
GH
Yeah.
changed throughout the years.
Yeah.
Obviously, because he's just more
Mm-hmm.
knowledgeable and stuff like that. But based on that, we can see a lot of videos that's just basically counteract each other, and there's nothing, to be honest, like for the real bodybuilders, for people who are using it
Mm-hmm.
in a like way that we do as a bodybuilders,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually talks and compares the different opinion of people who are like top
Yeah.
coaches and
Well,
people. Yeah,
that's one of the things I'm trying to do with Troponin IQ is get people on a platform where there's an AI systematized process where the AI is recommending things, but you're giving prompts and you're updating your profile. And so we could theoretically, it won't be linked to a person, but we'll have all this data somewhere. And eventually I would like to be able to go back and say, hey, Troponin IQ, find every user who reportedly used GH for at least a 16-week consecutive period at any point in the last 5 years, find their doses and find their dosing protocol, and compare it. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see basically this: more GH, uh, uh, more progress, and you're going to see a scatter plot, and it's going to be, you're going to find a trend line in that, but you're going to see this, and you're going to see all these dots, and no one is going to be able to look at those dots and say that guy split his doses, that guy took it at night, that guy took it in the morning. They're not. They're going to say that guy took 10 IUs, that guy took 5 IUs, that guy took 15 IUs.
yeah, yeah. So going on that, going on that, if I'm somehow gonna manage those rank tables, I would really love to invite you,
I
because
would love to. Yeah.
yeah, I believe that you have one of the strongest opinion about the GH in the industry right now,
Yeah, and I
and I
don't.
love it.
Yeah, I don't, and I like, people get mad because one of my strong opinions is about training and how unimportant I think it is, and they think it's like I want that. I don't want that at all. I want there to be a magic GH protocol that only I know, obviously, but
But
I'm not going to lie. Just like I want training to be the most important thing because I loved training hard and I loved training heavy and I loved outworking everyone, but I also know that that isn't the deciding factor because there's almost no correlation between the top bodybuilders in the world and who the top training bodybuilders are. And it would be great if there was, because I was much better trainer than I was a bodybuilder. But the fact is, I think that basically there's a minimum workload that stimulates maximum muscle protein synthesis, or at least the maximum that you can appropriately cover with your diet.
yeah.
And most of us are well above that. And the easiest way to say that is if you don't think you're above it, then why are you not doing more sets now? If you think more work builds bigger muscles, then why aren't you working more? Why? And so everyone's afraid to not work hard enough and thinks they need to work more, and everyone thinks that's the path, but no one's working more because they know if you did 5 more sets every workout, it doesn't guarantee more growth.
Yeah, I kinda agree with you and kinda not, because I know what you mean by that. That like more is not more, but I do believe that training is the most important thing, to be honest, because not of the volume and amount of work, but the actually quality of work. Because I believe there is a many, and I see it on my clients as well. People just sending me videos, and I can't just comprehend in my head that this is actually a
Well,
set they are
yeah. Well,
doing and not a warm up.
there's obviously a minimum workload, and there's people that below that. But anyone, I mean, no, the people. This is another thing I need to clarify. I'm not talking to the guy who's 42 and doesn't know what a workout is.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the guy who thinks his leg workout doesn't count until he pukes. Or it's and I just like to, and anyone can disagree with me, and I hope people disagree with me, and I hope they prove me wrong, because these aren't like my thoughts, these aren't my opinions, these aren't like I didn't say here's an opinion I have, let me state it. this is me watching the sport and watching competitive for 25 years. And like with the training thing, this is me saying, God fucking damn it, why can't training be more important? That's the only part I'm willing to work harder. I got a big appetite. I hate dieting. I'm not, I'll admit there are people who are willing to suffer on a diet harder than me, but I don't believe there are people who are willing to train harder than me. So I wish training was a thing, but I can look back over, and for me, it's obvious. The hardest I trained was the worst I looked when I was like 22 coming out of football, and I trained like a psycho, and I was a fat piece of shit because I ate like a fat piece of shit who was a drunk college kid, and it's like, well, not too long ago, I did some videos a year and a half ago or something. I got in pretty good shape. I did some arms, and I was barely even working out. I was working 20 minutes a day, but I was dead on with my diet, and I was on a cycle. And I've had guys win contests. Brian Shell, I doubt he'll listen. I don't think he follows the sport anymore. He's a cool guy. He was a romance novel cover guy. He looked like Fabio. And if you ever go to like Walmart or something, you'd always see him on romance covers. But he was a bodybuilder, and he was a client for years in the mid 2000s, and he injured his back really bad. And so he competed always as a heavyweight. He injured his back, and he was super depressed, and he wanted to do something. He wanted to do a show, but he couldn't work out. He couldn't barely do cardio. And so he wanted this weird idea. He said, I want to do a show, but I can't work out. I'll do a cycle and I'll eat whatever, even if I have to starve because I know I'm not burning my calories. Well, he won the show. He won as a light heavyweight. He was almost 20 pounds lighter on stage, but he won a bodybuilding competition and not working out for 6 months, just using PEDs and a proper diet. And he obviously wasn't as big, but he beat everyone else who trained hard, but probably didn't do because obviously he was working with a coach and he was dialed in, and by then we knew his body. So we were dead on with the diet, zero training. In that case, beat everyone else who did train their ass off, but didn't have quite as good a diet. Now, obviously, he would have been better if he trained, obviously. And up to a point, he wouldn't be always better if he trained. And that's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're better if you train, but it doesn't go forever, because training 10 hours a day doesn't make a better bodybuilder, or taking 100 sets to absolute failure every workout doesn't make a better bodybuilder. I don't know where that threshold is, but all of us are above that threshold, because if we weren't, we would be training more. We don't just like stumble on what we do for training. Maybe early on you follow programs, but if you've been doing this for 10, 12, 15 years, you don't just like walk in and think, well, here's my routine, I won't put any thought into it. You're constantly tracking your metrics, your progress, your soreness, your recovery. And so all of us are already in that zone. I'm just the only one saying it. And no one else wants to say it, because by saying it, it's like you imply that you're not training hard. That's not it at all. I trained as hard as I could. That was the most proud thing I did in my sport, in bodybuilding. But I also know that some percentage of that wasn't applied to new muscle growth. Metabolic benefits, fat burning, sure, but yeah, that's same with GH, is the same thing. I would love there to be a magic protocol, and I hope someone finds it, because I'll use it. We'll all be better bodybuilders. But to the best of my knowledge, from tracking a lot of data, I haven't seen it.
Yeah. With this
Man,
one,
sorry on the sidetrack.
So I'm gonna just switch it to the next question, just because I have a lot of them, and we are like an hour in.
I don't shut up. Yeah, I have a very bad problem with rambling.
Hugely sorry for the interruption, guys, but thanks to your comments, subscriptions, and thumbs up, I'm even able to create a podcast like you're watching right now. So if you can, please leave the subscription, comments, and simply a thumbs up. If you wanted to further support me, please use my code. And without further ado, let's get back to the podcast.
It's just something that I admire, and I love to hear that. So don't worry about it. But you've mentioned a couple of times, obviously you just said that you'll be probably using some sort of fat burners around 10, 12-ish weeks, because probably it's going to be needed. If not, obviously not. But if a couple of times you just mentioned the GLPs, and I'm seriously curious about your opinion with peptide use, because this is a huge topic right now, and there are like very constructive opinions about that in the conscious industry. Some say it's brilliant, some say it is garbage. I'm talking about every peptides, not only GLP-1s. So if you have an opinion about that, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, and again, I'll say, what's the old say? Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one, they all stink. And so when it's an opinion, it is just an opinion. None of us know. And I think people forget that, they think, well, this person's an expert, or this person's an influencer, this person's known as a coach. So yeah, their opinion likely has more weight, but none of us know. We're all tracking data plots. We're all applying it with clients, seeing what benefits there are, what problems there are, and then looking at the research data, looking at what little we know about the long-term data, trying to track the fact that, man, it really does seem to be very promising for drug addiction. But conversely, that seems to be very troubling for like emotional connection and sexual drive, because those things are very similar, neurotransmitter pathways. And so, yeah, so no, I don't, anyone says they know, they're lying. They have an opinion based on the very limited data we have. I'm a high volume coach. I've been a high volume coach. I'm not someone who just worked with pros. I'll work, if I have space, I'll work with anyone. So anyone listening, and I do have some spaces right now, it's, like contest season starting, so it'll fill up soon, but so I work with a lot of people. A lot of people no one will ever know I worked with. I've about as much data on this currently, just about as anyone else. None of us have more than anyone, and everyone who's a high volume coach, and none of us have enough data, because the GH took me 15, 20 years before I felt confident saying that, because there would be an outlier and you're like, man, I don't know, this guy's doing really good progress. And we are doing a split protocol with him, and he does seem to be progressing better than everyone else. It isn't until the next off season when he's like, coach, my work is totally different. I can't just be pinning throughout the day. I'm in an office now, and they moved to just once a day at the same growth dose. And you realize, oh shit, nope, they did progress the same rates. They, I don't have the data for that. What I think we're going to see with GLP is probably essentially a miracle for appetite. I mean, it really is. It just removes it. But I think there's going to be a lot of side effects that people are going to let themselves be blind to early on because of the benefits. And I think we're going to see a lot of, I'm already seeing it. Oh, I hate off-season use. I have so many guys using the off-season then can't eat. And it's like, why? Just because we're so drug happy in this sport. It's like, just because a new drug comes out, you have to take it. Even if, like the whole point of this off-season, we're trying to get more food in you, and now you can't eat, but you won't stop. So many times this has already happened to me where guys are like, well, I'll just drop down to 1 milligram. It's like, why are you taking it? Your lipids aren't improving that much, and you don't act like you're suddenly Mr. Lipid. You haven't given a shit about your HDL for 20 years, and now because there's a new drug out, you're all pumped. You're Mr. HDL, So my thing is that it's basically a miracle for appetite suppressant. I think there's going to be a lot of side effects that develop over time that we don't quite know yet, and I think the big one's going to be, I think just society as a whole across the globe, interpersonal connection and relationships are just in the shitter. I work from home. And I work a lot, and I'm always in this office. I go weeks without talking to another human in person, and it wasn't like that my whole life. It wasn't like that even as a coach early on, because I also train at home. But I just noticed over the years that like everything is shifting away. There's no, when you were like 18 to 22, were you ever alone? Every member I have is out with friends doing shit. Kids don't do that anymore. One or two friends get together and they talk to their other friends on Snapchat or whatever they're using these days. It's different. And I think that is not a good drug for society from that. And when you take away men's sexual drive, the modern world exists because of men's sexual drive. I'll try not to get on these tangents, but women don't have to prove their value. Women can create babies. Men don't care if a woman is educated or intelligent. I mean, they do a little bit, but what if she makes a lot of money? No one cares. They'll marry the waitress that they love just as much as they'll marry the CEO. And in a lot of cases, they prefer the waitress, especially insecure guys. Men, it's different. Men need to create value. A man without value is an incel. It's a guy who plays video games that can't get laid, And so what have men done? Well, they created everything. New York, LA, movies, bombs. We go out because we're just trying to get pussy. That's really, I mean, like at some core, that's what drives us, because it's all young men. In any industry, you'll see a burst of innovation through their 20s, basically. And I think what happens is that's where you're old enough to have enough education, enough schooling, enough exposure to information to know enough to create new thoughts and new ideas and new theories. But you're not so dark. You haven't known all that stuff long enough that your brain no longer thinks anything's possible. You're a 50-year-old professor and you've taught the same physics courses for 30 years. Your brain stops thinking there's any other option. You know all the answers. And I think Man, if we start losing that, I don't know where the innovation comes from, where that, we need that drive in people to mate, to interact, to get, social interaction. And I think just basically everything we've done in the last 100 years is kind of taking that away. And GLPs are a big one, I think.
So
We're great for bodybuilding.
So summarize up, you're not using it.
No, I am. Fuck those guys. They can find their own pussy. It's not my job. No, I mean, no, I just worry about it. But it for the acute, immediate, if someone's in contest prep and they are hungry, there's no better compound. I worry what the future effects will be, but I also know that I was a bodybuilder. You could have given me, if someone could have given me, well, like, here's a super GH, it's going to cut 10 years off your life, but it's going to work 100 times better than the regular GH. I would have been like, where do I sign up? Take 20 years off. I don't give a shit, And so I understand it, but that's my only worry is I think there's going to be side effects that it will make it not good for bodybuilding, because I think that drive is also important for bodybuilding. For me personally, I have ADD. If I take Adderall, I don't work out. I don't want to. I have zero interest. And I've learned that working out is my ADD medication, and so I specifically don't take Adderall for that reason. Because it removes that drive. Whatever that drive is for me that isn't satisfied in my brain naturally, I go to the gym and train really hard or focus on some weird thing I'm obsessed with, focus on my nutrition. I'm always kind of forcing my brain to be focused on something, and it kind of self-medicates in the way I want, which is, the sport I love.
Yeah. Okay. If we wanted to get through the peak week, I just need to make this 3 last ones like
no sidetracks.
Quick one, okay? So
no
just quick answers. More cardio and more foods, or less cardio and less foods? What's your preferable way?
Like through peak week or the whole prep?
Just prep. We'll still be in prep.
Different for everyone, but I hated cardio, so I will only give you the least cardio we can get in shape with. But most people need quite a bit of cardio still to get contest lean.
Okay. When it comes to the way of doing a cardio, do you like to do it steady state, HIIT, or like counting steps, something like that?
Yeah, I do. I like bodybuilder HIIT, I call it. I don't do HIIT, but I do like the cycle of intensity, and that's what weight training is. You do legs, you're doing a minute set of squats and then a couple minute rest. So what I try to do is just accelerate that. I have guys do 1 minute hard, 1 minute light. What does 1 minute hard mean? Well, you're not sprinting because you have to recover in the next minute of walking to be able to run for another. So it self kind of regulates, but it basically, if you do 1 minute hard, 1 minute light, you can get in 12 minutes, which is only 6 hard minutes, you'll burn as much calories as you do 20 minutes of steady state. And you've mimicked a little mini workout. So the next time we do legs or back, we don't have to worry as much. We can focus on legs and back, not our lungs, And people, I know you hate cardio, and I hated cardio too, but go do a 20 rep set of squats that will improve your quad size and tell me whether your lungs ended the set or your quads ended the set. If your lungs ended the set, you're not going to be as big as you could be. And in that case, cardio absolutely will make you bigger, and you'll be able to eat more too. You have a better metabolism. So that's why I like HIIT. But when calories get so low and you're just not capable of doing the high intensity and the risk of hypoglycemia is higher, 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, 4 weeks out, we'll switch to LISS. But I also like to set a step count, not for cardio, as a minimum NEAT level. So I basically just say 7,000 steps a day, 50,000 for the week or something like that. Most people are around that anyways. I just want, when you get 4 weeks out, I don't want you to go to work, sit in your chair and not move for 6 hours or 8 hours. But that's why I do steps, not as a calorie burner, as a blocker of like calorie suppression. I just make sure your basal metabolic rate stays at that minimum level.
Okay, makes sense. So cheat meals or refeeds, and let's say for someone who is not struggling that much mentally, like I can take whatever you want me to do. I can go without a cheat meal for months and years.
Yeah, then I don't force it, but if I'm sure you can, if you don't need to, why would you? So I use both. I use primarily high carb days to refill, and we basically have at least one a week all through prep, and typically only one a week all through prep. But usually on the last meal of the day, if we have a 6 meal plan, I will let you replace that 6th meal with a cheat meal. And I don't put any restrictions. There's no caveats or anything. I let you have the cheat meal. Now, if you don't want to win, I hate putting any restrictions on it, because it should be a break from the diet. But if you turn it into an eating contest, and I see this a lot, and it's usually the people are not going to be successful bodybuilders. You give them a cheat meal and they go try to enter an eating contest. It's like, no, we're trying to get cravings out. We're trying to refill what your body's asking for. I'm letting you have it in this meal. So the next 6 days, it's out of your head. Eating, like trying to see if you can eat 10 pounds of deep fried butter to win some contest. That's not what you're craving, So that's the only caveat I put is just make sure and if you're not craving, don't have it. But there is no real benefit. And what I'll say also is I adjust every week. If you're eating too much on the cheat meal, I'll remove it, I mean, that's why we track things. Are you on track? We started here. We know your body fat needs to go through here. We have multiple metrics. We have images every week, photos sometimes multiple times a week. And peak week, we might have photos every meal. And we have scale weight, and we have your health metrics, and we have what you think your training's like, your energy. We have all this metrics, and we need to see that everything's trending down. And if you're not trending down, we remove the cheat meal. So, like it's if you blow up on it and you eat it like shit and you do eat the 10 pounds of deep fried butter, you're not going to have it very long. But yeah, that's how I view high carb day, cheat meal as the last meal of the day. So you have to go to sleep. If you stay up and eat, you're just going to short yourself on sleep. So it kind of restricts it a limit that way.
Great. So let's say that I am ready. I'm ready. I'm lean. Like you can see basically through my skin.
Let's go. Yeah.
So what now? Let's say that we are starting to those magic periods, the peak week. What do you think about a peak week? How many days you schedule your peak week? Is like 10 days, 7 days, 5 days? First thing I wanted to ask you, sorry if I interrupt you, I just wanted to
it's fine.
Clarify the all like salts, like potassium intake and water intake at the beginning. Do you structure it like trying to set it flat with the athletes just to know what you are starting with?
Yeah, and I don't restrict it, but I want it stable because your body is going to maintain 0.09% blood sodium. It is. That's just what it does. It doesn't go up or down. It does for a short period of time, and then your body readjusts. So whatever sodium and water intake you are at, eventually your body's stabilizing to 0.09% sodium, and that's what we want. So that's all I want. I like high sodium, higher, 6 to 8 grams for most people. If you're a high sodium person are already at 10 or 12 grams all prep, I'll keep you there. I don't restrict it. And I want it relatively high, but stable is the most important. We need aldosterone and vasopressin stabilized, not fluctuating. So we need to know every morning we wake up with the same aldosterone levels, the same vasopressin levels, and that comes from a stable water and sodium intake. So I'll basically put you at 6 to 8 liters of water a day. There's no benefit to doing 12 liters or trying to like water flush. All you're going to do is just flush electrolytes. Like we think, we need to push to the edge of optimal, but optimal isn't always just more. There isn't optimal. There's a range like this. We want to be right in the middle of optimal, which tends to be extreme most of the time, but it isn't, drinking 10 gallons of water a day doesn't make you a better bodybuilder. Keeping high stable water intake. So 6 to 8 liters of water, 6 to 8 grams of sodium, and that's it. We just stay there until depending on the person, but most people will reduce water the last day or something, sometimes the last 2 days, but I don't do a big water restriction either.
Okay, great. What about the GH? Do you cut it before, or it depends on how the athlete looks, and what do you looking for when it comes to the look? Because there are coaches who says, yeah, it depends on how the athlete looks, but what do you actually want to see on the athletes? Do you like to see his full? Do you like to see his full and hard? Do you like to, maybe you just think that he's very full and we're gonna dry it out at the last 2 days or something like that? You know what I mean?
Here's the most important thing for everyone listening, whoever plans to step on stage. You will like how you look full. The winner will win because he's dry. Because you go through any show, what Mr. Olympia winner where everyone like, yeah, man, he won because he was full. No, everyone's shredded. There's 10 mass monsters on earth and you're not competing against them. They're all at the Arnold and the Olympia. Those guys can beat people, Andrew Jack can beat people on size, but when does he look his best? When he's dry, Samson can beat people on size. He's one of the few people who can really mass, but Samson, like big and dry so dry is what wins shows. unless you're 300 pounds on stage, you're not beating people by outsizing them if you're soft. So that's my main thing is dry. If you can be full and dry, double bonus. But if you can be full and not dry, you're not winning. Dry first. That's what flat and dry will beat full and watery every single time. In the gym at a photo shoot, you're going to want to be full and watery because that looks good, but it doesn't win shows. So for GH, I've tried everything. And that's actually one that I kind of have just a stock set now. I basically, for almost everyone, I cut it. The last GH day is 4 days out. And why? I've tried, 2 weeks, 10 days, 7 days, no cut 3 days. I've tried everything. And I've just found that for essentially everyone, cutting it after, like on a Saturday show, Tuesday would be your last dose, is enough to lose the GH water essentially for everyone, but not lose all the GH fullness. By the 5th day, you kind of lose a little bit of that fullness. So that's why it seems to, for me, be the optimal amount of time to maintain most of the fullness, but none of the GH water. I've had people keep it in straight through the show, and you just have to dry it a little harder. You just have to understand that it's affecting sodium levels a little bit, but that's kind of where I'm at with it. Yeah, 4 days is the last day, and it's been safe. It's almost foolproof.
So do you cut the test or lower it? Or basically, I want to ask you, do you cut it off all injectables before or not? And what you're basing the decision on?
Again, the decision is based on the stage. I don't want any lumps. I don't want any bad injections. I don't want any infected stuff. I don't want your glute watery and swollen. I don't want your delt watery and swollen. So that's why we cut based on that. Long esters, intonate, stipionate, things like that, 5 to 7 days. That's enough. You cut it 5 days out. There's very low risk of it still being swollen and red and watery on show day. Short esters, I'll let you go to 3 to 5 days. But the only reason I cut them is for that. I don't cut orals. I don't cut fat burners. I don't cut anything. Basically, if you're taking it, if you wake up in the morning and it's a pill you take on the first day, like the day before we keep taking it because we know how you look with those in. We don't know how you look with them removed. And same thing, we don't technically know how you look with the gear removed, but we know if you step on stage with a big swollen glute and no striations, you're not winning. So it's the risk is in the bad injection site. So that's why that's the only thing I cut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've mentioned the orals, and actually that's a great question, which I am not have listed here, and I should. Do you bump it up the dose of the orals at the end of the
Yeah, and I was hesitant because I always hated guys who loaded orals before training because it doesn't, like maybe you'll get a little bit better workout, but the workout, we grow from the eating around the workout. The workout produces a stimulus and a little bit better workout. Like if you're competing in a powerlifting meet or you need to compete on a day, sure, maybe give it a try. But so I was like, why are we loading it? Just add risk. But over the years I've changed, and I do generally employ like an oral androgen load for an anti-estrogen. So Winstrol is kind of my favorite, but really anything like halotestin would work. I'll even use Anadrol, because Anadrol is not estrogenic. People forget it's it causes a big aldosterone shift, but we're mitigating that by water and diuretics and stable sodium levels. I've used everything, T-ball, DHB, chuck drops, but I've just found Winstrol. And if you tell someone who's been in the sport long enough and you say the word Winstrol, their brain's like, oh God, acid reflux, my joints hurt. It's like, oh yeah, all the things that happen when you have low estrogen. I mean, you take Winstrol, you feel the low estrogen, you're achy, your joints hurt, it's harsh, your lipids go to shit. And what causes lipids to go to shit? Like high androgens and low estrogens will make your lipids go to hell in a handbasket. And so that's kind of why I settle on Winstrol. If a client insists they respond better to halotestin, I'll know they probably don't, but I'll know the placebo effect of believing that you do is very strong, and we'll have them use halotestin. But yeah, I do an androgen load last 10 days.
Yeah, you've mentioned the estrogen control with oral. So would you incorporate as well something like Retrosol or?
Yeah, I actually like Aromasin, and I'll tell you why. And I consider myself a coach and a nutrition expert. I know a lot about training because that's technically what my degrees in, but I'm not. I know all about the compounds and the drugs, but they were just never my interest. Well, I pick aromasin because it's a suicide inhibitor. And so when it's bound to the enzyme, it stays bound for life. So you don't produce new estrogen until you create new enzymes. If you take Arimidex, it's no real risk. You take Arimidex, and if you stop it on show day, all those enzymes that were bound by Arimidex, when the Arimidex wears off, are now free to aromatize new estrogen plus the new stuff you made. So you can get a rebound. That's the only reason I do aromasin, and I don't load it. I know there's like everyone goes through phases where people take a ton of AIs. Take Masteron, Tren, and Winstrol and aromasin and go get your blood work done and tell me what your estrogen is. It's gonna be like your E2 is like 7. You know, do you get any benefit by bottoming out to 4 or 5? You know, it's already 0 basically. So I don't do like crazy doses, but you will get up to like a full tab per day the last few weeks.
Yeah, unless you are not doing the ultra sensitive test of estradiol, so you're probably going to be around a couple thousands. So how about the diuretic use? Because you've mentioned the diuretic, and I would like to incorporate it here because everyone probably like at this point know your like not insulin but blood sugar method and stuff like that. People are using it in like not incorrectly for years probably. So could you explain that?
I hate diuretics because so aldosterone is an anti-androgen. One of the main uses for it is PCOS in women to make them less androgenic. You know, and if you look at the side effects for men, one of the side effects of aldosterone is gyno, you know. And so sodium acts like an androgen in the body. And I always say Branch Warren, I don't know what he did, and he may have cut sodium, but I'm just from his look, Branch always had really good microvasculature, the really small veins right at the surface of the skin. He never had that smooth skin look. And so there's a couple shows where he would get like praised for his conditioning, but if you really know what you're looking for, he'd have some water on his lower back, but he knew how to manage that sodium level to dry out but not flatten his veins out, which makes you look granite hard. You lose that when sodium gets too low, and that's the only way diuretics work. They flush sodium. So you're dealing with that. I'm not anti-diuretics. I just know that it's a risk because you want the water loss, but the problem is sodium and water are required for glycogen. You know, glycogen is glucose, sodium, and water. So you remove the sodium and water and you start taking and that's where the blood sugar protocol comes from, because if your blood sugar is climbing, that means you don't have enough sodium to combine with water and glucose to form glycogen. You cannot be full. You cannot. And in that case, if you take a diuretic and lower sodium even more, and then your blood gets worried because it can't store this sugar. The blood sugar is climbing, sodium levels plummeting. We're going hyponatremic, and so it goes into something redistributed. Yeah, you got to move that water somewhere. It's not going to move it to the muscle because it can't, because there's no sodium, and so the concentration gradient's under the skin. So you're dealing with that. Too much diuretics is the worst look you ever have. The right amount of diuretic is the best look you ever have. And so that's kind of where the art comes in, is that I like a mild one. I like HCTZ. I like chlorthalidone is my favorite. It's a slightly milder version of that kind of, but you'll never find that. But if you can find chlorthalidone, it's good. Diazide, which is, HCTZ, hydrochlorothiazide with triamterene is good. It's a little stronger. Triamterene doesn't do that much. HCD is just predictable, easy, 4 hours. Basically, you can take it and do a check-in in 6 hours and know if it did what you needed it to do.
Yeah. And actually, the diuretic use comes from probably not understanding the intra and ultra cellular water, because some people still think it's possible, and we both know it doesn't.
It'd be great. Yeah, make everything easy. Well, that's kind of the thing I always say. Like, that's the main thing is, it's nothing in any interesting sport where there are experts. When you've come to that area, whether it's a sport or a subject or anything, and there are experts in that field, know that you're going to learn something, and your first thought's going to be, we should do this. That was their first thought too. That was everyone's first thought. So if that isn't what everyone's doing, it's because it doesn't work. You're not going to outsmart the experts with the first thought that comes in your head. And so that's what I say with diuretics. Whenever it's like too obvious to be true, it's too obvious to be true.
2 questions. What are your preferable way of carb up, and how long before the show? And do you often or at all carb up your guys with some sort of junk food?
Mm-hmm. I do everything, and it's entirely like you mentioned Brandon Curry. Brandon Curry, for the first round we did, we did 4 or 5 heavy meals. When we did the Olympia, he was very big at the Olympia. The whole prep, he was big. We barely did a carb up. I don't think he went over 500 grams of carbs on any day. For the Arnold this year, he got food poisoning the night before the Arnold and lost 14 pounds. And so you want to know everything's different. Brandon, and everyone talks about is look at the Arnold. The day of the Arnold at Ohio, Brandon was chugging sodium and water and eating junk food because he was down 14 pounds, throwing up. His sodium levels were rock bottom. His blood sugar was rock bottom. He was dehydrated. And so we knew that we could take advantage of all that. So we were actively drinking water, eating sodium, eating junk food all through the day because we knew that was creating that gradient up in the muscle. And it worked perfectly. Where then back at the Arnold Europe, they lost his luggage. He didn't have his food. He didn't have his clothes. He didn't have his posing trunks. So we had to do that carb up where it was just him and Andrew in the final call. He looked great. We had to do that on street food. And so that's a totally different thing because we know his sodium's unpredictable. We know it's going to be higher. So we were, we were prepared with that by adjusting diuretics a little heavier, using them earlier. And so you just have to know how the body works. But yeah, you said ideal. Ideal would be you're stage ready at 4 weeks out. And we add 20% of calories, then we add 20% more, then 20% more. And by the time you go to peak week, you're 70% of the way to an off-season diet. And then our carb up is 3 days usually. I don't deplete. I don't like over deplete. You're dieting. So it is at some level of depletion. But typically a 3-day carb up, like a Saturday show, Wednesday and Thursday are your main carb up days. Thursday's the day we adjust the most based on how you look. Friday, we keep calories high, carbs fairly high, but we add fats more to keep everything more stable. And that's the day we kind of focus on drying out. Simple.
Yeah. To ask the next question, oh my God, I just need to assess one thing. What kind of look we striking for the night before? Because obviously there's 2 approaches. So you either trying to a little bit spill me, and then I'm gonna probably be like almost perfect in the morning, or keep me on some sort of maybe not as much full at the night. Then I probably gonna be a little bit dry, and maybe like too, how to say it, like, you know what I mean, like too dry, and probably you need to go a little bit more aggressive, because the next question is, how about the food on the show days in both scenarios, because that's gonna be probably determinant by now.
Yeah, and so I'll say we did this actually. We're filming with Generation Iron, and we had a good segment on this with Brandon because he at the Olympia he was spilling Thursday night. So they have a Friday night show. So that's kind of like Friday morning he'd be spilling for a Saturday morning show. So at the end of the carb up, you don't want to be spilling, but you want to know you're full. And you don't really know you're full until there's a little bit of salt. And really, almost everyone will have the same spot, but everyone will have their spot, and your coach should know that by the time you get to peak week. But like for Brandon, it's his glutes, hamstrings, and lower back. And for almost everyone, it is. For some people, it'll be around their navel. They'll start holding water at their lower abdomen, just really little, but you'll see like a little, it won't be even, everything's not evenly distributed. Yeah. And so you want that. And you want that at the very end of the carb up, because that is the end of the carb up. And once that happens, then it's like, great, now we can dry out. And we know we can even push the dryness a little bit because we have to. I hate saying that because you have to know when the spilling happens. Because if you start spilling at meal 4 and at meal 6, you're like, oh yeah, I think we're spilling. Then you've spilled. Then it's water now you're not going to be full anymore, because by the time you remove that water, you're going to remove glycogen. But if you can catch it just right for a Saturday morning show, it doesn't really work out because you finish carving up kind of Thursday, your peak is. For a Saturday night show, like for the pros, it's perfect because 24 hours out is that last carb up day, and we can go to bed spilling just a little bit, which is perfect because then they go lay for 8 hours with their feet up. So gravity isn't pulling water in their legs dry out, and we flush. So whatever's remaining in the morning, if there is still spilling, we know they're full. We don't have to worry at all about being full. We just don't hold that. We just need calories. We don't even need carbs. We could do fat and protein if we wanted. Just hold that and just focus on drying out. That's the ideal situation. It's a little bit risky if you don't understand spilling inside and out, because if you miss it even if they spill on meal 5 and you still feed them in meal 6, you're already it's going to be hard. You're going to be struggling to be full and dry. But if you catch it to the meal, like meal 6, they finish meal 6, and it's like, oh man, if we would have had a 7th meal, you would have spilled. That's the best feeling as a coach, because like, go to sleep, we're going to wake up, everything's going to be perfect.
Yeah, and that's tricky because you need to like look if he's spilling and know why he's spilling. Because I've been there. One time I've made my athletes hyponatremic, so his blood sugar.
That's how I learned about it.
Blood sodium level drops, and we'll screw at this point because that was just a couple hours before the show, and actually I didn't catch it. Back then, I've realized that's like a couple weeks after.
But it's good. I mean, that's what you do as a coach. That's the thing. And that's why coaches are expensive. People don't realize, and we've had that with Troponin IQ. Not to go back to that, but I've for a long time I was so confused because we'd have all these like pros and top athletes who'd use it, and they'd give you reviews and they'd love it, talk about the reviews. And then these other people would say they didn't like the answers, that the answers suck, blah, blah, blah. And they'd always be like Joe Blow, like Weekend Warrior. And so my brain would be like, well, these guys know what they're talking about. This Mr. Olympia thinks it's great. All these bodybuilders, and there's a lot of coaches using it. But I realize now we were giving them too advanced of, they would ask, what is protein? And it would talk about rate limiting amino acid, why you need and they're like, I just want to know if chicken's protein, And so you like, that's why you pay for a coach, because they know all those things. And most of the things we know is because of things like that. And a good coach will sit there and like, if you're a coach, you hate contests. I mean, you do. Why? Because only one guy and only one guy's happy. The guy who wins the over. If you have that guy, great, you're happy for that guy, but you might have 3 guys in the show, so 2 out of your 3 guys are not happy, even if they look great. It's just a hard sport. There aren't many winners. And as a coach, you're up through the night, you're doing check-ins every single meet, so it's so stressful. But if you are a good coach, you'll go through that period after the show. Like for the last 25 years, my Sundays and Mondays have been like, God, why did that happen? That is not, but you work it out, and that's the best knowledge you'll ever have, because if someone else tells you, oh yeah, sure, that makes sense. If it happens to you, you know it for the rest of your life. So yeah.
So coming back to the question, what about the food on the show days? Would you like to keep the diets like pretty similar, or you maybe just one big meal in the morning and then just rice cakes with the jam and maybe a little bit of peanut butter?
Yeah. It almost doesn't matter. My show day stuff is basically whatever is in with the fad at the time, because that's what the client's going to see and that's what they're going to want to see. And placebo rules everything. The only thing that's going to make you look worse on show day is cortisol and stress. And so that's all I do on show day. That's all I'm worried about. The only risk of food, you could go eat a whole pizza. You're not drinking a ton of water. Your blood sodium will spike, but that's fine for a little bit because you're not at, high blood sodium is fine. You'll store glycogen. It's going to draw water into the blood. Eventually that'll wash back out, but you got as much as 36 hours before that happens. But you can get distended and you can be stressed. And so like the rice cakes and jelly, that doesn't do anything. It doesn't, you might want a little bit of sodium and sugar before you carb out, but if you're properly full, you can go any time of year. The same thing with like people worry they're going to be flat. You go to and train just chest for 90 minutes in prep and get a pump. And people are worried that they're not going to be able to get a pump like for 15 minutes backstage. Anyways, I basically, if you those things don't matter, but your client does it, and he goes backstage and all the good competitors are eating rice cakes and jelly and he's not, he's going to panic. So that's the only thing I do on show day. I try to get, we do a basic meal, a meat and rice meal with some added fat. I recommend at least 2 if you can. If you get up super early, try to get 3. But we basically just eat like every 2 hours until about 2 hours before the show. And backstage, like I say, what do you eat? Well, what we want is we want blood sodium spiking a little bit with a little bit of carbs, so that while we pump up, if there is any gradient, there's a little stuff to go into the muscle with it. If there isn't, then it just sits there. And so that's chips, that's candy, that's peanut butter and rice cakes. It is what people eat, but there's nothing special about it. And you would be just fine if you didn't eat anything.
Yeah, this is why I asked, because I do believe it matters because of what you just said. So I believe that it is about the stomach control and blood sugar control, because if your blood sugars dropped, you are also screwed, to be honest.
Yeah, I need to be better about my caveats. It's like,
Yeah.
I thought, well, because I'm speaking from if everything's perfect.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
This is why I explained that.
Yeah, it's kind of like Tiger Woods. I saw him once say, like, he's like, yeah, when I'm striking the ball well, the wind doesn't even matter. It doesn't even affect my ball. And it's like, what? How does that? Well, the reason it doesn't is because he knows how to hit it below the tree line. He knows how to do things I don't know how to do. And this is when you've nailed everything, it doesn't matter. But if you do need to know how to correct things, are they low sodium? Are they flattening out a little? And you need to know how to correct those. And it's almost always just sodium and carbs will fix everything.
Yeah, definitely. So, what about competing like in a back-to-back show? Because this is something that obviously we won because I am your client, so we won. So we just come back to just get down from the stage. We are happy and etc. But we know that 6 days. In 6 days, we are just gonna trying to. For example, that was just a pro qualifier, and we nailed it. And now we wanted to compete in the pro shows. That's like a week from now. So what about now? I'm just coming back from going down from the stage. Do you water load me? Do you allow me from eating anything? Do you maybe just start to and you peak me right away? What do you do to make me peak again in about 6 to 7 days?
First of all, I'd say, dude, you couldn't find a show 2 weeks after. 2 weeks between shows is perfect.
I know that.
3 weeks is the next best. 1 week is probably the next best. 4 weeks is the worst because you have to go back into prep. 1 week is hard only because of the client, because the risk of them eating, I give them free food the night of the show, but the risk of them turning Sunday into free eating and not telling you is very high. It just is. And it's non-zero. You will not be a coach. You will not have 20 guys do back-to-back shows and have all 20 be perfectly on plan Sunday. So you have to be prepared for that. But what I do is I say, eat whatever you want and drink a lot of fluid the night of the show. We're trying to get back to 6 to 8 liters. You're just going to backload it basically after the show. Eat a bunch of food, then we just go right back to our diet. We'll do a low day, 6 to 8 liters of water, 6 to 8 grams of sodium, check in. You do another check in at 5 days out. And so that, to me, that shows how you look a day after we ate a ton of carbs, which would be after the show when you picked out, and how you look 2 days after. And so that gives us a little bit of glimpse of how your body adjusts the day after carb loading and 2 days after, because we are going to basically we won't need to do as much, but we're probably going to load 3 and 2 days out, and then we're going to dry out 1 day out. So I want to know, if we don't change sodium, we don't change water, we don't use a diuretic, we don't change anything other than reducing carbs a little bit, how does your body naturally peak over those 2 days? And I'll use those pictures to write the next peak plan. And then I'll send it to you, and we'll probably change all of it as we go based on how you look. But that's how I approach it.
Yeah. Great, and that will be the end. Just because you basically at the beginning of this podcast, if anyone just listen carefully, explain what.
Fast forward to the 30-minute mark.
Yeah,
calm down a little bit.
I'm gonna prepare the timestamps for them. So right now you could be lazy and just click it. But because normally I would ask you about what about the coming out of the prep, but you basically explained that you are not going to do like rebound every time. Is so high.
Yeah, I can be quick with that. If it's your first show, we're rebounding hard. Yeah. Lots of clean food, as much as we can, basically, to the point we don't want to kill your appetite for the off season, but we're going to get close. Brandon Curry, we don't do anything. We're basically like, you're 40, you're mid 40s. We got to stay alive. We got to stay healthy. So he's off everything, regular diet, whatever he wants to eat, until he just actually, while we were, he just texted me, he's going to do the, what they want him to do. Oh yeah, so 50 Pittsburgh. So we're gonna do Pittsburgh. Was that May? Yeah. So for him, so he probably hasn't trained since Arnold Europe and just eating whatever he wants. So it's just different. But if you're new to the sport, 75% of your progress for the off season can be made. I mean, it won't really be accumulated to the end of the off season, but the groundwork, the infrastructure for it is done in that 6 weeks after a show. It's the most important time of the year if you're a young bodybuilder.
Do you believe in that strict 6 weeks, or you sometimes just make it like maybe even 12 if
Yeah,
everything is
it's
perfect.
the yeah. If it's I don't know that I've ever had anyone go past about 8 weeks where we're really rebounding, and hardly anyone gets less than 4. But it's in that range, and you can. It sucks because this sport is so genetic, and we know it in every other sport. No one thinks they can take steroids and beat LeBron James at basketball. No one thinks they can take steroids and hit 70 home runs. But we all think we can take steroids and win Mr. Olympia. But genetics are everything. And one genetic component is how long of a rebound. Like if your metabolism holds up and you don't start getting super fat and watery until 8 weeks after a show, you're going to be a pro, most likely.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're fat at the 4 week mark, God bless you. And I love the sport and I never turned pro, so keep going at it. But
Yeah.
Other guys are getting twice as much rebound every single show that you get. So good luck, keep catching up to them.
Yeah, well, one thing you says that Brandon cannot do it because he's 30 or something like that. He's Brandon, so it's not even a subject.
I could send pics of him 12 weeks out, 10 weeks out, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Just God, well, you coach people. I mean, this is the hardest thing. Yeah, and it's so hard. And we understand in every other sport. Like John Heck, one of our supplement athletes, he's 6'8", 345. He played NFL offensive line. You look at him and you go, well, yeah, he's a human mountain. I could not do that, and no steroid's going to make me 6'8".
Yeah.
So and no steroid's going to make me run in the Olympics and track and field. And so it's a great sport in that it's so long duration. It's a 20-year sport that we can really, even if we have shit genetics, we can completely change our physique and our life. But the top guys, they're working with a different set of tools than you are. And it's impressive to watch in person, but it's also disheartening because it's a different set of tools.
This is why I stopped competing, basically.
Yeah, same. Oh, what happened? Steve Kuklo. I mean, yeah. I'm on the fast track to pros. What Flex Magazine features me as like the next big thing. Steve Kukla comes along at 19, doesn't even know what protein is, and a year later he's beating everybody. I'm like, well, okay, I see where we're at now. I'm gonna go coach.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, Justin, for your time, and I hope that everyone's just satisfying after those 2 years of like those in between those two shows. And actually I've just uploaded the first one on my newest channel because
awesome.
YouTube is not so kind for the algorithm. So even though you have like 70K on my Polish channel,
I got really good on that.
Yeah, normally I've hit like nothing, and this is why I've put everything and re-uploaded here. So guys, if you listen to this, I am gonna prevent you with a lot of new stuff here, but also I'm gonna slowly move the older ones here as well, just because I just cannot lose it, because it's too precious to me to have those here. So please just forgive me about that. So thank you, Justin, one more time. And anyone who just wanted to start be coached about you can find all the links and all the affiliation down in the description below. And one more time, thank you for your time. If you wanted to say something at the end, this is time for you.
Jecka. It's my baci never spoke English, and the only Polish words I remember were "Yakti J, Dami Buje." And when I was bad, she'd say, "It means you're a devil, not a child." She'd go, "Tarabi Jetska." I don't know what I'm probably saying it wrong, but those are the only things I remember. But she's been gone for 40 years now. But
yeah.
How do you say that? Would you say like you're a devil, not a child? It sounded like it was like yeah, that's it.
Something like that,
yeah. My bachi used to say that, and I never knew what it was, and everyone would laugh. And when I was older, my parents would tell me she was telling me I was a devil. I wasn't a child.
Yeah, but it is something with those Polish grandpas. They like to refer those. They're like. I don't even know who is for them in English. Never mind. But I don't know why they are referring to devil. My grandma doing the same. That's kind of scary.
Funny. Yeah, that's funny. No, well, she was, yeah, I mean, she never spoke English. So, like, well, when you're a kid, I wish she lived longer because you learn it. So, like, we'd go over and, like, you don't even think when you're 4 or 5 years old, you would just talk to her. And my mom would always say, yeah, you kind of spoke, like, I don't remember anything anymore, but I always think I'd like to go back and try to see if I can learn any of the language again. Not that I knew what like a 4-year-old would, which is about what a 4-year-old learns in English, which is like 8 words that don't make sense. But
I can be your native speaker if you want.
All right, perfect.
Okay, so we're going
you ever
to
see
set
that
up
new
the lessons after.
All right, perfect.
Okay, thank you guys. If you are here with us at the end of those almost 2 hours podcast, thank you so much for that. And obviously, that will means a lot if you leave the comments, subscribe, and stay tuned. So see you next one.